Well, hi there. I'm Diana Montford, the world's first transgender television journalist. Born male, became female. And we are shooting this show in a time of COVID. So you will hear the guest, but you will not see her because we are not allowed to have guests in the studio, So, welcome to the time of COVID. My guest is Ms. Jillian Weiss, transgender activist and brilliant and well known transgender lawyer who, not surprisingly, specializes in transgender law. And she's going to tell us about some of her interesting cases, about how we can defend ourselves against the forces of injustice. And she's going to tell us about a new book she's written called Gender Identity and the Law by Jillian Weiss and David Cruz. It's a wonderful book, mainly for law students, but anyone who is interested in transgender law should read it. And here she is, Ms. Jillian Weiss. Hi.
Hello.
Hi,
Hello,
hi, hi.
Diana. How are you?
I'm fine. Now, you've seen Jill on other shows, and you can see her on YouTube on previous shows. But as I've said, in this instance, you will hear her but not see her, sadly. So, so transgender law, what is it that makes it different from most law?
Well, I think one thing is that many lawyers do not understand transgender issues or even issues involving the larger LGBTQ community. And legal cases are very sensitive things. The facts matter a great deal, and understanding how the law intersects with those facts that affect people's lives on the ground as they live it in the street and in their homes is very, very important. So if you have a lawyer who doesn't understand these and you are a transgender person who has experienced discrimination, you'll have to do a lot of education for your attorney.
Hasn't every transgender person experienced a lot of discrimination?
Well, I do think that's true. Even relatively privileged people, um, and I know, many of them. I've certainly heard stories from them of different events of discrimination they have experienced, and I think that as you, um, you know, multiply these identities that are subjected to prejudices, you really get quite an intersection um, that occurs. And Black transgender women, I think, receive the most discrimination, both, I mean, in terms of jobs, in terms of on the street, in terms of housing
In terms of
discrimination.
living, they're also the ones who are murdered most often.
Yes, that is true.
The Day
So
of
we have to
Remembrance is
recognize.
almost all transgender women of color,
Yes, that's true.
and that is a terrible thing.
Well, look, I mean, if you deny people decent housing and jobs, and cram them into areas where it's less safe, and there's more people, and there's people who uh, are not necessarily understanding transgender issues. I mean, it makes perfect sense because you've put them into a situation where there's no winning.
And often they have to turn to sex work to survive,
Some do, certainly,
and
and
or
no shame in that.
or drug dealing or other not legal things that get them into trouble, and then they fall into the judicial system, and the judicial system is freighted against them, and they are screwed.
This is why I think that employment discrimination is one of the most important issues for us to tackle. I mean, all of these other things you just described are very, very serious. But if a person has a good job and can earn a decent living, then, a lot of that is going to go away. Um, but, unfortunately, you can't. I mean, I think that a lot of trans people, if they could, go out and get a job as an investment banker, they would do it, but it's not available.
Unless they are willing to be stealth. Although today that's not possible because via computer, it's very easy to check on someone's background.
That's true. Very little stealth these days.
So, on the other hand, prejudice seems to be unpopular today. Prejudice against trans folk. People might actually feel it, but they say, oh, I'm not prejudiced against trans people. No, 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 no. Meanwhile, they want us dead, but at least they feel compelled to say that they're not prejudiced.
That's true. The idea of prejudice is not popular, but the prejudice itself is plenty popular.
Absolutely. So now there are several strata of transgender people, as you mentioned earlier. There are the white privileged transgender people. There are the people of color. And then there are the people who are trapped as part of an underclass created by the upper class. And it seems to me that most of the people trapped as members of the underclass are the ones who suffer the most. Is that true?
Yes, I think that's right. I do think that's right. And, that's what it is in capitalistic society. We have hierarchies, and there's people at the top and people at the bottom. And it's very unfortunate. I think that we need to move our country back more towards compassion and understanding and making sure that people are taken care of rather than, getting every penny for myself that I can.
Well, it's very Darwinian, this business of slice and dice, dog eat dog, and to hell with everyone else, you know? And that's not what the American dream was supposed to be about. It was supposed to be about, everyone has a shot. Not everyone gets shot,
Well, I mean, was it? I mean, it was established based on racism. I mean, if you read the Constitution in its original form, you see an awful lot of racist uh, rhetoric and issues. And of course, the founding fathers were many of them slave owners, so it was not founded on equality. I mean, the idea of equality for certain people, certainly.
Well, yes, but they certainly dehumanized anyone who was not an oligarch, a plutocrat with a gazillion slaves. Absolutely, yeah. And
Right.
but of course, those were the only people who could be founding fathers in those days, because nobody was going to listen to a silversmith named Paul Revere unless he started screaming, the British are coming, the British are coming.
Right.
So we sort of have to step back in time and see that, yes, it's terrible that they were slaveholders, but no one else could have founded a nation then in this area of the world.
Who knows? But I will say that I do think we've made a lot of progress, as much as we still have very far to go. But, one thing that gives me hope is that when I talk to people about their experiences of employment discrimination, which is much of the work that I do,
Mm-hmm.
there are laws to help people nowadays. When I transitioned 20 years ago, as you well know, Diana, I immediately lost my job as a lawyer and had to work as a secretary, which was fine. I actually liked working as a secretary. It's a great job. But, you know, how do people protect themselves? I mean, if you are experiencing discrimination at work, you want to make sure that you take notes of what happened and when and
let,
who was there and
let me
who were the
ask you a
witnesses.
question. Since this was
Yeah.
20 years ago, when you were working as a secretary, were you stealth?
I wouldn't, no, I wouldn't say that. I don't think it was possible for me to be stealth. I was extremely androgynous at the time. Really was not gender conforming in any way. So I think they were very, very clear. I didn't talk about it a lot with them, but they were clear, that I was trans and then I was transitioning. But they were really nice to me.
I once
Very,
did
very
this
nice.
movie called Larry Ravioli, and I was in the dressing room with the other actresses, and the first thing I said was, "Well, I'm transgender," and this older actress turned to me and said, "What direction are you going in?" That's why I always say, born male became female, just in case people don't know which way it's going.
Sure.
Um, let's talk about the Supreme Court.
Ah,
Yes, the rapist Kavanaugh, the religious fanatic Amy, whatever her name is, Once not in love with Amy. What is this woman's name? Amy what?
Coney Barrett.
Coney Barrett. Okay. Now, supposedly, we who live in the U.S. are supposed to hold U.S. laws as the ultimate law. If this woman is so Catholic, she's obeying the laws of a foreign power, the Vatican. Can she, is she fit to be a part of the U.S. government if she has more loyalty to a foreign government than to our own?
Well, we don't know that. I think, she certainly has a great deal of religious principle that she believes in. But I think a lot of the justices on the Supreme Court do.
But can
And
this woman inflict her religion on the rest of us if it does harm to the rest of us?
well, I mean, as a technical matter, she cannot because we do have a First Amendment that prohibits the establishment of a religion. And of course, there are arguments about, well, what does that mean? What is the separation of church and state?
Well, doesn't freedom of religion also mean freedom from religion?
Well, yes, to the extent that it's not imposed on you, but you can't say, well, gee, I don't want that church building over there because I don't want to have to look at it. I don't like churches. Like,
Well,
that's
well,
not,
excuse me, now that they say religious freedom and all that, what if I say, well, excuse me, it's part of my religion not to live near a church. I can't live near a church. Get rid of it. You know?
well, and there are a lot of complicated rules about when religion can, be considered and when it cannot be. I mean, one of the issues before the Supreme Court now that we're actually waiting for is Fulton versus City of Philadelphia, where they're looking at a foster care agency that was, I believe it was Catholic in nature, and they've never denied anybody who is same sex from being foster parents, but they did not believe in same sex marriage and so on, and a lawsuit was brought to say, you can't have this religious agency with its religious principles and denial of same-sex marriage or marriage equality, be in charge of what should be government services of helping foster children. And the Supreme Court heard it the day after the election, and we're still waiting for a decision. And there's various tea leaves that people are reading, but it's going to be a very
Well, it's
important
like that,
decision.
that birthday cake case. Now, personally, I would not want to eat a birthday cake baked by someone who hates me. I mean, rat poison, spittle, what is in this thing? But, um, I really have to stop smoking cigarettes. But anyway, what can we do if they decide that? I mean, someone might say, well, I don't like redheads, so it's against my religion to have redheads in my building. Get out of here. I mean, they can say anything.
Well, that's true. And the courts have said that they will not look into what the principles are of a religion as long as it's sincerely held.
How do they
Maybe
gauge that? I mean, it's very difficult to know who is sincere and who is just playing the system.
well, true. I mean, but nonetheless, that's the ruling. But that has given rise to groups like I believe it's the Church of Satan, they call themselves, which has brought a number of cases to, on the basis of their religion to make certain changes to various things like schools and I don't remember what. And then of course there's the Pastafarians, which is a religion of the flying spaghetti monster. Have you heard of that?
No.
Yes. Well, it's out there, and it's not a parody. And they also, have brought some cases, and it's open season. So as you said, anything I can assert anything is a part of my religion,
And any prejudice.
and any prejudice. And here's the interesting thing. I mean, the Supreme Court is clear, and I think that most courts in the U.S. are clear that if your religion says you have to hate black people, then that is not going to receive any, approval from any law in the United States or any judge or any court. you must follow the law that says you may not discriminate. I mean, they can't, remake your heart, if you're a prejudiced person, but you can't discriminate. You can't take discriminatory actions. And that is clear as a bell, but for some reason, it's not clear when it comes to gay and trans people, and I don't understand.
We have made tremendous headway in the past 50 years. I transitioned many, many years ago, decades ago, and believe me, we are so much luckier now than we were 50 years ago. The thing is, we're still really unlucky, you know?
Yes, yes,
And
we are.
now you have a case about a professor. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, there is a professor, Dr. Rachel Tudor, who is a professor of English literature, specializing in Native American literature of Southwest Oklahoma. And she was a professor at Southeastern Oklahoma State University,
Mm-hmm.
it's a university of the Oklahoma Regional University System. And prior to her receiving tenure, she transitioned from male to female, and there were problems that ensued. And somebody said, this offends my religious beliefs. Other people said, well, you can't use various bathrooms, you can't dress certain ways, and so on and so forth. And then before you know it, she had applied for tenure, which basically means that after several years of teaching and publishing and working with the school, that you ask the other faculty members to say, yes, you know what, you're doing a great job, stay with us, we're going to give you tenure. And that means, I mean, you can still be fired, but you can't be fired without just
It's
cause.
basically job security, yeah.
It's basically job security, and part of it is academic freedom, because we don't want people being thrown out of their jobs by the governor or whatever because they said something unpopular with the political groups.
Mm-hmm.
But in any event, she was then told by the upper echelon that she would not be allowed to receive that tenure that she had been granted by the faculty, and they basically got rid of her. So she brought a case. And that case started in 2011.
And it's now 2020, soon to be 2021.
Exactly. And so she, brought her case. I brought her case originally to the federal court in Oklahoma. And then at some point, I went off and I became executive director of the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund. So another attorney took over the case and took that to trial, and in Oklahoma won a jury verdict of over $1 million for that woman on the basis of her discrimination and retaliation, which was an amazing thing because you would think, oh, Oklahoma, they're not going to recognize the rights of a
Right,
transgender
yes.
woman, but it's not true. Good people are everywhere.
Yeah.
But of course, the other side appealed, and the judge reduced some of the verdict and so on. There's all kind of legal maneuvers, and so it was just actually recently argued on appeal before the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals in Denver, and I did that argument. And the reason it took so long is because we all knew, and the judges knew, that that case was coming out from the Supreme Court that came out this past summer that said that discrimination against a transgender or gay person is sex discrimination and is not allowed anywhere in the USA.
And that's the 1964 law against sex discrimination.
Correct. And the name of that case was Bostick.
Okay.
And so, the court was waiting. Well, let's find out what the Supreme Court's going to say about all this. And then once it did, we went forward to the argument. And I think that the judges, I think, felt a lot of sympathy from a legal perspective for the professor.
One hopes that
We're waiting for the
judges can,
decision.
one hopes that judges can rise above their personal prejudices and look at the law dispassionately, you know?
I felt that these judges really did that.
Good.
I felt that they gave both sides a fair shake in terms of the questions that were asked. Um, and we'll see what happens.
Now tell us about that book of yours.
Oh, well, That's a very exciting book of about 1,100 pages that I wrote with Professor David Cruz,
Good
who
sex
is,
scenes in it? No.
well, yes, there's sex on practically every page. I
Oh,
had to do an index. David and I had to do an index for the book, and there were a lot of entries for sex. It was really,
it's
but it's a textbook for law students, and so it's called a case book. And what that means is it's got different legal case opinions in it that we've whittled down so that they're easier for students to read. With
things that have
you know,
established precedent, that kind of thing.
yes, in other words, here's an important case. Read it, and then you discuss it in class. And here's some discussion questions to think about. And so it's quite a large book, and there's no plot twist at the end, unfortunately. It's not really something you would read for pleasure, but it is the first of its kind, and I think it's important that that kind of textbook exists for law students so that professors will have something to teach such a course from, and then the young lawyers can learn about that and go help trans people out in the world.
I agree. Are there young trans folk becoming lawyers?
Oh, yes, many. As a matter of fact, I was the founding executive director, I guess, or what did we call it, chair? I don't remember, of the Transgender Bar Association, which I'm now a member of. I'm not, on the board at this point, but there's hundreds of people who are members of that.
Hmm. That's wonderful. And many, I'm sure, specialize in transgender law.
I do think that probably many have an interest in that, and many do not, interestingly. Many are interested in just all the other kinds of things that everybody else is interested in.
Good. And that's real liberation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Now, do transgender law cases come up that often?
Oh, yes. What's surprising is that when I really started working in this field, which was about 20 years ago, um, there were very few cases out there, and they were far and few between, and you could count them, on two hands. And gradually they grew and so on. And now there are thousands and thousands of opinions dealing with every possible area of transgender life. I at one point I knew all the transgender cases there were. At this point, it'd be impossible. And I stick to my area of discrimination, specifically with employment mostly, but some housing as well. So, there's all kinds of specialties of prisoners' rights and healthcare and, ID changes and all that kind of stuff. So there's lots
Would you
to
know
know.
if it's possible for people to change their birth certificate, social security card, ID card all over the nation now, or is that only in some states?
Well, some of the things you named were federal, so you can change those, like Social Security card, passport, and so on. Um, but the thing that people use most often is a driver's license, and it depends on the state. And of course, you can go to there's lists on the internet. I think the National Center for Transgender Equality has a very, very good one that will give you all the information on your particular state and all the different areas: your driver's license, birth certificate, whatever, all the things you need.
I'm happy to say that because I was born in New York and live in New York, I was able to change all my papers to reflect my current gender and name, and that was a wonderful thing.
That is wonderful. New York was one of the first states to allow that.
Yeah, and that's a great thing. And let's hope it becomes nationalized because everyone should be able to live their truth.
Absolutely.
So,
That's
and
the American dream, isn't it?
absolutely. So, how
Okay.
can people get this wonderful book and what is it called?
Well, as I mentioned, it's called Gender Identity and the Law, and it comes out from an academic publisher called Carolina Academic Press, and they have a website. And if you go there, they have a list of all the different book titles. Just click on the G, I think, and you'll find Gender Identity and the Law, and you can get it as an ebook, and you can also order it. I'm not sure that it's available for ordering at the moment. I know that they were supposed to put up a link, but I'm not sure whether that's happening this week or next week.
Okay. And if you had something to say to trans people who are terrified of the system, and we both know many who are, what would you say?
I would say that we all have to continue to work together to make this a better world for trans people, for trans youth, for trans elders. All of these things are possible in community. And while there are many sympathetic people, no one's going to do it for us. We have to do it ourselves as a community. And I know in my area of employment discrimination, I am very pleased to work with a lot of trans people who've experienced that and to, get them the justice that they deserve. And I know there's many, many other advocates in all different areas, not just law, but social services and the
Hmm.
sciences and medicine and so on. Many, many people working together. And so I also say that one of the best ways to take some control and some power in a situation where you're disempowered and others are in control is to advocate for yourself, for your community, to take the power back to the extent that you can. And that gives you, or gives me at least, a feeling that I am doing something to change the difficult things that I see every day.
Wonderful. Well, I don't know what I can add to that. That was wonderful. And yeah, we really do have to do it for ourselves because sadly, no one will do it for us. My guest has been Ms. Jillian Weiss, who is a transgender activist, who is a lawyer specializing in transgender employment law and housing law. Can you give your website or your email address in case people want to contact you?
Oh, the easiest thing is you just look up my name on Google. It'll come
Okay.
right to the top. It's Jillian Weiss. And the website, in case you want to have it, is JT, like Tom, Weiss, WEISS, law.com.
Okay. As I've said, my guest is Ms. Jillian Weiss, transgender activist and lawyer, a great lawyer, a truly great lawyer, a one who has made history and will continue to do so. And I'm Diana Montford. This has been the Diana Montford Show. Hey, I love you, okay? You're not alone. You have me, right? And you have Jill and you have a lot of people. You're not alone. Wherever you are, we're with you. And you don't have to be afraid. I love you a lot, and I'll see you next time.